Mack Charles Parker's brutal murder in 1959 remains one of the last lynchings of the civil rights era. A 23-year-old black truck driver and Army veteran, Parker was falsely accused of raping a white woman in Lumberton, Mississippi. Despite inconsistencies in the victim's account and her later recantation, Parker was jailed and awaiting trial. On April 24, 1959, 3 days before his trial, a mob of armed men abducted Parker from the Pearl River County Jail. They beat him, shot him twice, and threw his weighted body into the Pearl River. His decomposed body was found 10 days later. Despite an FBI investigation identifying suspects, including a former deputy sheriff and the jailer, no one was ever indicted. In 2009, the case was reopened as part of civil rights-era hate crime investigations, but justice for Parker remains elusive, symbolizing the era's brutal racial injustices.
Shalom. First and foremost, I want to open up by giving all the praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rechakudash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well and preach the truth and truth and sincerity. Shalom to the hopeful elect. This is the brother Amawan Ayashim at GMS Indianapolis camp, coming back at you with another quick lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. And as today's lesson is going to be another installment of our camp series here in the GMS Indianapolis camp, entitled For Thy Violence Against Thy Brother Jacob, which is directly titled after the book of Obadiah, the first chapter, which is only one chapter, and verse 10. Okay, excuse me, Salakia. A little voice crack there. But even though the book of Obadiah has only one chapter, it is very powerful, as it spells out the judgment that's getting ready to come upon Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, and why the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai is bringing this devil's judgment upon him. What led to the judgment that the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai is getting ready to bring upon this devil. What we go through in the series, entitled For Thy Violence Against Thy Brother Jacob. All right, we always say that this ultimately serves as a testament as to why Esau, Edom, as to why the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai is getting ready to bring a heavy judgment upon Esau, Edom, the so-called white man. Okay, but let's go ahead and open up with the book of Obadiah, chapter 1 and verse 10. It says, For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. You see, so this is the judgment that the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai has declared upon Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, due to all the evils, atrocities, and murders that this devil has committed towards the Lord's chosen people, the Israelites, all right, being the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, right? And ultimately, Esau, Edom's in judgment for all this is that his entire nation is going to be completely wiped out, man. Okay, let's go from there to the book of Zechariah, the second chapter, and we'll start at verse 6. It says, Ho, ho, come forth and flee from the land of the north, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, which this land of the north is referring to Babylon the Great. And within prophecy is referring to Babylon the Great, a.k.a. America. Okay? It say, Ho, ho, come forth and flee from the land of the north, said the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. For I have spread you abroad as the four winds of the heaven, said the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. And one of the judgments that fell upon us due to our disobedience against the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai is that what the Lord kicked us out the land and scattered us as a nation throughout the four corners of the planet Earth. Okay, and we know that within the last days, majority of us Israelites are held captive here in the land of Babylon the Great, a.k.a. America. All right, this is where the bulk of us have been scattered towards. Verse 7, Deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwells with the daughter of Babylon, for thus saith the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. After the glory hath he sent me unto the nations which spoiled you, for he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of his eye. You see, so ultimately you devils, are you so-called white people, beginning with the top wicked elite, okay, you are guilty of putting your hands on the apple of the Lord's eye. which the apple of the Lord's eye, being his most prized possession, okay, is who? The nation of Israel, okay? And you're not going to get away with that, man. All right, this is why the Lord is heavily fucking up America with these various different natural disasters. Right, this is why America's economy is failing. The Lord is breaking up spiritual Egypt from within. Morally, spiritually, financially. You see, and this is just only the beginning, man. Okay, the Lord, he's going to continue to fuck this place up, man, all the way up into the missiles. You see? This is the book of Amos, chapter 1 and verse 11. It says, "Thus saith the Lord Yahweh Bashmi Yahushai, for 3 transgressions of Edom, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he did pursue his brother with the sword, and did cast off all pity, and his anger did tear perpetually, and he kept his wrath forever." You see, that word perpetual goes into what? Everlasting. And we see throughout the generations how the hatred that Esau, even the so-called white man, has harbored towards the children of Israel has lasted throughout many generations. Even from the time in Genesis 27 chapter, let's go ahead and get that. And even from this very time, Esau's hatred for the so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, the Israelites, is still present to this very day. Genesis chapter 27 and verse 41, straight to the point. It says, "And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart," meaning his mind, it says, "The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob." So ultimately, Esau, even the so-called white man, he has purpose to slay, right, Jacob, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, for generations. Okay, and that's why out of all the nations, right, Esau, Edom's violence is the heaviest towards the so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, the Israelites, because he feels as if he's able to, get us all out the way he could receive, he could get that birthright and ultimately receive the promises. But that's not written for this devil. Okay, he willingly gave up his birthright, and through the Spirit, right, we know that birthright was always going to go to Jacob. You see, it just played out how it played out according to the will of the Lord. You see, so Esau's not getting that birthright back, and ultimately, he will not be successful in trying to completely wipe out the nation of Israel. Okay, but we know that ultimately what he's trying to do with us, right, completely wipe us out as a nation, as it talks about in the book of Psalms, 83rd chapter. That's going to fail and come back upon him. And his nation is going to end up being wiped out, according to the book of Obadiah. Okay, but let's jump into the article. This article is from blackpast.org, dealing with a Jake individual by the name of Mack Charles Parker, born 1936, murdered 1959. It says the murder of Mack Charles Parker is considered one of the last civil rights era lynchings. On the night of April 24th, 1959, a mob abducted Parker from the Pearl River County Jail in Poplarville, Mississippi, where he was awaiting trial for the alleged crime of rape. You see, and that's when we look at these stories where a so-called Israelite man was lynched, it always begins with the same accusation, based off an accusation where that a white woman made up. Okay, based off an accusation that this Jake man ended up raping a white woman. Which in a lot of these stories, these so-called white women end up recanting, or taking back their statements. But that's after the fact of the matter that that the Jake man had been brutally put to death. You see, it says they beat Parker, shot him twice in the chest, and then threw his body into the Pearl River. Mack Charles Parker was a 23-year-old truck driver who returned to his hometown of Lumberton, Mississippi, after receiving a general discharge following 2 years in the Army. After the death of his father, he had taken on a responsibility of supporting his mother, Liza, and his 2 younger siblings, Dolores and Charles. On the morning of February 24th, 1959, Parker was awakened by Marshal Ham Slade and several deputies, who alleged that he had raped a young white woman, June Walters, the night before. Parker and a group of friends were out drinking the previous night and saw a disabled car along the side of Highway 11 between Poplarville and Lumberton. It says Parker stopped his vehicle, perhaps hoping to steal the tires, and approached the car, which that's more than likely a goddamn lie. You know? Because how do you know that? You know? He got his own vehicle, but for some reason he wants to steal tires off another vehicle when his vehicle is functioning just right. You see? It says, after seeing Walters inside the vehicle, however, he returned to his car and drove away. Jimmy Walters had gone to get a tow truck, leaving his pregnant wife, June, and their 4-year-old daughter, Debbie Carroll, in the car. The police alleged that Parker returned to the disabled vehicle, forcing June Walters and her daughter into the car with him. He then drove to an isolated spot where he raped her. Walters was clear that a black man had raped her, but she was unstable to state with certainty that Parker had been the assailant. It says her description of a middle-aged man who was 5'10" and 160 to 170 pounds did not fit the young Parker, who weighed more than 200 pounds. Walters picked Parker out of a lineup, but she later recanted this identification. You see, and this is why ultimately also, all right, you eating my woman, man, y'all not gonna get any mercy either. The whole house of Esau ain't getting no mercy. But you so-called white women, y'all not guiltless, man. All right, because this through a lot of y'all's false accusations and lies that, you know, a lot of Israelite men have been put to death in the past, man. You see? This is Psalms 109, starting at verse 12. It says, let there be none to extend mercy unto him, neither let there be any to favor his fatherless children. And we know when all is said and done, all right, Esau, even the so-called white man, will not be receiving any form of mercy from the Lord Yahweh by Shai. All right, it tells you that in the book of, in his Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. All right, when you go into the definition of Edom, it says that Edom is the only neighbor of the Israelites not promised any mercy from the Lord Yahweh by Shai. Okay, real quick, we'll jump back to Psalms, but let's get this in the book of James, the 2nd chapter. In verse 13, it says, for he shall have judgment without mercy that has showed no mercy, and mercy rejoiceth against judgment. So the judgment that Esau, even the judgment that the Lord Yahweh by Shai is getting ready to bring upon Esau, even the so-called white man, is that Esau, even the so-called white man, is not going to receive any mercy. And why is that? Because he has shown no mercy, okay, against the Lord's chosen people. All right, this is Isaiah, the 47th chapter. In verse 6, it says, I was wroth with my people, I had polluted mine inheritance and given them into thine hand. Thou didst show them no mercy. Upon the ancient hast thou very heavily laid thy yoke. You see, so we know that what ultimately the Lord Yahweh by Shai, he gave us into the hands of you devils, ultimately because of our disobedience against him, due to our transgressions against him. Okay, but as the scriptures talk about in Zechariah, the 1st chapter, right, the heathen who have fell for the affliction, the Lord gave you an inch and you took them out. All right, you showed absolutely no mercy upon us as a people, man. You know, using our babies as a alligator bait, you know, knocking our teeth out and force feeding us and shit. No, you see it in the slave movies, man. All right, how horribly Esau, even the so-called white man, treated us. Okay, and that's just what we see in movies, man. You know, and here in history. You see, so who knows the true amount of atrocities that this devil has committed against us, man? Okay, but at the end of the day, those things are the reason why, as to this devil is not going to receive any form of mercy, as to why his entire nation is going to be wiped out when all is said and done. You see, back in Psalms 109, And verse 13, it says, let his posterity be cut off, and in the generation following, let their name be blotted out, man. So all generations of Edom, all right, the Lord's going to cut them off, man. All right, does not say in Isaiah the 14th chapter and verse 21, it says, prepare a slaughter for his children for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise nor possess the land, nor fill the face, nor fill the face of the world with cities. And what is the iniquity of these Edomites, man? Are the atrocities, the evils that they have committed against the Lord's chosen people, the Israelites, right? The so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. So for all that evil that you committed against us, man, the Lord is preparing slaughter for you, man. All right, for your whole nation. Verse 22, for I will rise up against them, said the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and son and nephew, said the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. So the entire seed line of Edom is going to become, is going to come to naught, man. Okay, which also we're going to get later in this lesson, the Lord's will. All right, there should be none remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai has spoken it. Right, and the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, said that his word shall not come back unto him void. So if the Lord said that there should be none remaining of the house of Esau, then that's what it is, man. You see? So going back into Psalms 109 and verse 14, it said, let the iniquity of his fathers be remembered with the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, and let not the sin of his mother be blotted out, man. All right, because at the end of the day, mainly, man, you women are guilty for a lot of the Jake deaths that have taken place in the past, man. Especially during this civil rights era, you know, which once again, majority of these lynchings, if not all, start with the false accusation of a so-called white woman claiming that, you know, a Jake man, right, you know, assaulted them, you know, raped them, whatever the case may be, and later on they want to recant or withdraw their statement, man. All right, the Lord remembers all that shit, man. Okay, and you white bitches gonna have to pay. Y'all ain't exempt. It says on April 13th, a grand jury indicted Parker on 2 accounts of kidnapping and 1 count of rape. On April 17th, he pleaded not guilty to the charges, and a trial was set before April 27th. You see, and Jake never really had a fair trial. Okay, and that's also because at the end of the day, we're under an unjust judge. You see? It says 3 days before the trial, an 8 to 10 person mob wielding guns and clubs dragged Parker from his jail cell. The participants included J.P. Walker, a former deputy sheriff, and Jewel Alford, the jailer who provided the keys. The men drove Parker to the Bogalusa Bridge. After shooting him, they weighted his body with chains and threw it into the river. Parker's badly beaten and decomposing body was discovered floating in the Pearl River 10 days later. You see, absolutely no mercy, man. You see, and we see that, man. When we read these stories and these articles of these lynchings, right, in history, man, all right, you can see that this devil has had absolutely no pity or mercy upon our people. Okay? They took murders to the fullest extent they can think of, man. Okay, and if they could have thought farther in the moment, they would have done it. It says in the aftermath, Governor James P. Coleman called in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Despite the unwillingness of the townspeople to cooperate, Salakia, it says the FBI filed a 370-page report, which was forwarded to the governor and then the prosecutor. However, those suspected in Parker's death were never indicted, and we always go into it. You know, Psalms 30 of the 73rd chapter talks about how they are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. See, here it is, you know, these devils is committing straight up murder, okay, and are able to walk away scot-free. See, but that's what happens when you have the wicked and unjust ruler and rulership, man. Righteous judgment never goes forth. Like it says in, I think that's the book of Habakkuk, Habakkuk chapter 1 and verse 4. It says, therefore the law is slack, and judgment doth never go forth. For the wicked doth compass about the righteous. You see? And that word compass goes into what? Surround and circle. You see? So, Esau, even the so-called white man, is always trying to, close in on the righteous, man. Trap the righteous. You see? Which, back then, man, in reality, man, Jake really had no way to, get out of certain situations, in cases like this, man. Okay, Jake being wrongly accused, not having a fair trial, okay, and just straight up getting murdered, man. It says, for the wicked doth compass about the righteous, therefore wrong judgment proceedeth, man. You see, so true justice, right, under Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, all right, the unjust judge is not being carried out. Okay, but we know that ultimately when our Lord Yahweh Shah returns, he's getting ready to bring true justice, man. True recompense, okay, upon this devil. Right? It says, in 2009, the FBI reopened investigations in 43 civil rights era hate crime cases in Mississippi, including the Parker case, but it remains unsolved. And how? How does it remain unsolved when, all your evidence is right there? Good and goddamn well, all right, this Jake, man, he didn't rape this woman. All right, he didn't stop his car just to steal some fucking tires, man. You see, that's bullshit. This is just another case of Esau Edom's hatred on display. Okay. And Esau trying to come up with an excuse to justify him, all right, putting his Jake man to death. But as you can see, that's the end of the article. And I'll go ahead and leave you with this in the book of Obadiah, chapter 1. And verse 18. It says, in the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble, and they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau. For the Lord Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, has spoken it. You see, it ultimately is the reason why, going back up to verse 10. For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. You see, so, we know, you Edomites, man, your kingdom is going down, and after your precious America is destroyed, all right, beginning with the top wicked elite of your nation, you're going into slavery. And after you serve out your captivity in our kingdom for 1,000 years, all right, the remainder of your nation is going to be rounded up, burned up, and, there shall never, ever be another Edomite to touch the planet Earth, man. As we just read, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai has spoken it. And once the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai speaks something, that's what it is, man. We read earlier that the Lord said he's not going to turn away the punishment thereof. You see? So I'm going to go ahead and close out. I pray that this lesson was edifying and informative to the elect body of the nation of Israel. And without further ado, I would like to close out by giving all the praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Hakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well and preach the truth and sincerity. Shalom to the hopeful elect. Lord's, I'll see you in the next lesson. Until then, I say shalom.